These are the solutions for Algebra A, Test 2, Quarter 4. So looking at the first type of problem, it's asking us to solve for where the two lines cross. That's solving a system. And whenever I've got a variable by itself, like I do here, where y equals this expression, I'm going to use substitution. Take this expression for y and substitute it into the equation above and solve for x. So what we've got left is x plus 2 multiplied by the 2x plus 8 equals 1. And what you're going to do from this point is distribute the 2 over that addition. So when I do that, I'm left with this x plus now 4x plus 16 equals 1. So I can collect some like terms and move this 16 back to the right-hand side, and I am left now with collecting these. I have 5x equals negative 15. So when I do that division, dividing by 5 on both sides, I end up with x at negative 3. And so what you're going to do from this point is substitute this answer back in for x, maybe into this equation here, and solve for y. So y equals 2 times by negative 3 plus 8. So when you do that work, negative 6 and 8 make 2. So y equals 2 when x is negative 3, and that's where the two lines end up crossing. Do the same thing on this one. Take this expression, substitute it into the equation above, and so what we have is this 3x plus 4, but you got to multiply that by 4x minus 11. And so when you do this, you're distributing that 4x, or 4 over that difference, and so we're left with this 3x plus 16x minus 44. And so we go ahead and, let's see here, should have an equal sign somewhere here. It looks like right here, equals negative 6 I should have there. Equals negative 6. So it's the same sort of thing. You're just moving this 44 back to the other side. So I end up having to add it to both sides. Now watch the signs here. They're opposite, so you're going to end up subtracting instead of adding. Left with the 19x when we add those two numbers together, and here we get negative, or positive 38. And so when we go ahead and do the division, 19 does go into 38 2 times, and so x is 2. So we take that 2, substitute it back into the equation. Probably that top equation will work. So y equals 4 times by 2 minus 11. So y equals 8 minus 11, which gives me negative 3. So there it is, 2, negative 3. So that's the same way you're going to do this next problem. You're just going to substitute. Take the expression that you have here and substitute this into the equation above. And so we have now 3 times by, and then you get the 2 minus 5y, all being added to this 4y equals negative 5. And so you use that distributive property. Distribute that, you got this 6 minus 15y plus the 4y equals negative 5. And so we're going to go ahead and subtract the 6 from both sides and collect some like terms. So you notice that the signs are opposite here, so we end up having to subtract. Negative 11y equals negative 11. We have to add these two because they're the same sign. So we go ahead and do some division, divide by negative 11, and we end up with y equals 1. Take that 1, substitute it back in for y. Either equation, but the one at the bottom is the fastest because x is by itself. X equals 2 minus 5 times by 1. Well, 5 times by 1 is just 5, so it's just 2 minus 5, which makes negative 3. So there's your answer. Negative 3 comma 1 is where the two lines end up crossing. Well, one more substitution problem here. Take this 3 plus y, put it in for x in the equation on top. So you got this 3 plus y minus 2y equals 8. So it's the same as the other. You've got to subtract the 3 from all sides. Collect some like terms. Notice they're opposite in sign. Leaves us with negative 1 equals, or negative 1y equals 5. So when you divide by that negative 1, you end up with y equals negative 5. Take that negative 5, substitute it right in for that y, and that bottom equation will work, or the top, either one. And so we end up with 3 plus negative 5, which makes negative 2. So x is negative 2 and y is negative 5. You write the answers in ordered pair because that's where the two lines cross. Next couple problems, we can use elimination. Notice how the x's, y's, and constants are in line. We don't have a variable by itself, so elimination works really good. Now I can just add them together at this stage because the y's end up canceling. Their coefficients are the same number but opposite in sign. 7x equals 0. Now that's okay. You can get a 7x equal to 0 because you can divide by 7, so x would end up being 0 as well. I'll just take that 0 and substitute it, maybe in for that bottom equation there. That'll cancel out the 3 there. 3 times by 0 plus 4y equals 20. So that just leaves us with the 4y equals 20. You do that division, and you end up with y equals 5. So there it is, 0, 5, where the two lines end up crossing. I can do the same thing on this problem because you see how the y's will end up canceling. Now make sure you add these two numbers together. You get 3x equals, and then this makes negative 6. When you divide by 3, we get negative 2. So you take that negative 2, substitute it, maybe in for that bottom equation there. Negative 2 minus 5y equals negative 7. So when you go ahead and do that opposite operation, you end up having to add the 2 to all sides. So we still have this negative 5y equals now negative 5. When you divide, you end up canceling out the negatives and the 5's, and you end up with 1. So negative 2, 1, where the two lines end up crossing. Now, the next few problems, you can't just add them together initially. You need to modify one of the equations. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to end up multiplying this top equation by negative 1. Every number there by negative 1. What will happen is it'll switch the signs of all the terms. See, now we have the y terms canceling because they're opposite in sign. I end up with a negative 2x equals negative 8. Do that division, divide by negative 2, and I have x equals 4. Take that 4, substitute it back into that bottom equation there. So I've got 4 minus 4y equals negative 3. So when I go ahead and add that 4 to both sides, I end up with a negative 4y equals 1. So I can divide, and I end up with a fraction. That's okay. You just write it as that fraction. Negative 1/4 is the number. And so we can write that answer as, we get a 4, negative 1/4. Now let's take a look at our next problem. Well, before we move on to our next problem, let's see if I made a mistake over here. It looks like I did. You see how this is a positive 4, and I added 4? That's my mistake. So let's go ahead and fix that right now. I need to really subtract this 4 rather than add it. And so that's going to change this answer here. So I'll go ahead and erase the parts that are wrong, and let's fix it. And so here you see how it's a positive 4. I'm going to take 4 away from all sides, and now I end up having to add the two numbers together. So I end up with a negative 7. So when I do the division of negative 4 doesn't go in there, but it does cancel out the negative sign. So our answer is going to be 4, 7/4 is our number there. Same sort of thing on this next one here. Multiply by negative 1. Distribute that negative, and you end up with a negative x minus y equals negative 3. So when I add this stuff together, I get those y's to cancel. So I'm left with a 5x equals 1. And I end up with a fraction once more. Divide, and I get 1/5. So x is 1/5. Take that 1/5, substitute it in for x. Probably that top equation will do. So I now have 1/5 plus y equals 3. So I end up having to subtract a 5th from 3. Now how do I do that quickly? Well, here's how we can do it. We can rewrite this 3 as 2 and 5/5. You see, 2 and 5/5 is the same as 3. 5/5 is 1. 1 plus 2 makes 3. And now I can subtract the 1/5 from the 2 and 5/5 because they have the same denominator. So I'm left with 2, and it makes 4/5 is the number there. So 2 and 4/5 is the value of y. So I'm going to write that as 1/5, 2 and 4/5. Well, look at this next one. It's a little bit tougher than just multiplying by a negative. I need to multiply by negative 2. And the reason, or I could have multiplied by negative 3x, depending on which one I want to cancel out. Here I'm going to cancel out the y. So I end up with a negative 2x. Now minus 4y, because the 2y times by the negative 2 makes a negative 4, equals negative 20. So if I go ahead and add these two equations together now, I get those y's to cancel. So I'm left with an x equals negative 16. So that's my x value. So let's take a look at the next one. Actually, I subtracted wrong. I was looking at that number wrong, I guess. And so let's fix this real quick. This will make 16. Take 8 from 20. Clear up these numbers a little bit. You end up with something a little different. So this is 20, and this would end up making negative 12 rather than negative 16. Take that negative 12, substitute it, put it back in for x. Maybe that top equation there, we got negative 12 plus 2y equals 10. And so I could go ahead and add this 12 to both sides, leaving me with the 2y equals 22. Divide by the 2, and I end up with 11. So there's our y value when x is negative 12. So let's rewrite this. Negative 12, comma, 11. That's where the two lines end up crossing. Well, check out the other parts for the other problems from the study guide.